I want to welcome everybody to this session. I'm very excited. When I moved to Chico a few years back, I was very excited to see this garden guide at the nursery and ran out and bought a few more for my family members because it is such a great resource. I came from an area that had a calendar, Monterey Bay area, and I'd hung on to it for 16 years until I moved here. And of course it didn't apply. Coast is a very different environment, but it just reminded me of what a great idea to have a month-by-month planner or information month-by-month that I needed to pay attention to. So I was really excited to see this garden guide, and as I became a master gardener, decided to really promote it and encourage people to take a look at it and think about getting their own garden guide. So just a couple things that we have decided would be helpful for all of our Zoom workshop sessions is, first of all, we are still learning and figuring this out. Today we've got a new component. We're going to have a video inserted, so that's something new. Microphones and video are going to be turned off in general, but you're encouraged to submit a chat to either Sharon or to the whole group if you have questions or if you have ideas or comments. It's really helpful to hear from you. We're used to doing this in person. I taught this class a year ago and it was very different. We were able to get very interactive, so it's a little different, but hopefully we're trying to make the best of the situation. So if you could converse or chat or let us know what you're thinking, that would be helpful. There is an evaluation survey that will follow up to the session today. And included in that will be a PowerPoint PDF. And so you'll get a copy of this document as we proceed. So it should be out to you in the next couple days. And then we're hoping to have video recordings available for folks, either that couldn't make it at the last minute. I know some people out in Butte County have no power right now. And so for those folks who want to make it available at a later date, we're working on that. So. Let's see, let's continue on. So the garden guide, I'm going to change my view here. I'm still learning how to do this. There we go. So the garden guide is a great resource. It is a guide of suggestions in terms of seasonal suggestions, as well as a place to record and document what's going on in your garden week by week over the course of 3 years. So you'll notice as you get into it, if you haven't had a chance to look at your guide, that there is a place to record over a 3-year period, week by week, so you can sort of do some comparison. In addition to that, there is a great upfront section that includes great resources and information about particular topics like pollinators and native plants and firewise and landscape design, pests. So there's a whole bunch of information as well as a place week by week and seasonally that helps guide you in the kinds of things you should be doing, preparation, maintenance, and so forth. The appendix also is very valuable. There's even more information and specifics about particular garden insects, pests, how to maintain your orchards, and the kinds of things that you want to be thinking about year round. So fortunately for us, because we are able to garden year round, it is an invaluable resource I've found. Okay. I'd like you to take just a couple minutes on your own and think about what have you noticed recently in your garden and how are you currently keeping track of your plans? Do you have a file folder? Do you have what kinds of ways, or are you like I used to be, very scattered with a basket of this and a basket of that and a box over here with materials? So I'd like you to think about, what are you currently doing? Just take a few moments to reflect on that. And how do you keep track of your current garden plans, progress, production, if you grow vegetables or fruit? And if you could, in the chat, feel free to share a few ideas that you have. But this is really for you to stop and think about, what are you already doing and how might this guide help support you in how you go about that. right. So hopefully you've thought a bit about it. As I said, my scattered method used to be my mode. I still find labels and tags from things I planted 30 years ago, which I no longer live in that place, but I wanted to have a more systematic, better on top of it all way of tracking how things are doing, things that are doing well, things that I never want to grow again, things that perhaps have taken over. And I wasn't maybe as paying attention as much as I should have in terms of how big certain things would grow. In addition to that, I've found as I've learned more, we had a native bee workshop last fall. I've attended some of our California native plant workshops. And so all that information I want to have at hand as I think about planning the next garden. And so I needed a better way to keep it all together so that when it's time to pull it out and start thinking about the fall or the spring or summer, that I have things organized and together in a way that I can find them and make better use. And so that's one of the reasons why we decided to have this workshop, is ways to think about that. And I've seen a lot of you as participants have suggested great ideas. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start off with hearing from the originators of the garden guide. Oops, let's go back a slide. And this happens to be, I was very fortunate to work with Jean Lawrence and Laura Lukes, who are co-editors of the garden guide. And actually for me, it was the first time that I learned how it all came to be, how the transition from a calendar version, which other Master Gardener programs in the state use, an annual calendar, how that came to be, and what was the process for actually developing this journal. So we're going to listen to them for a few minutes, share how that happened. And then Jean also has really taken it the next step. I think she's on her second guide, as she has been taking copious notes and observations and recording the kinds of things that she does in her garden. And so it's a great inspiration for me, but also hopefully it will help for you. So let's, I'm going to do a little switcheroo here, and we're going to go to the screen with the video. Okay, and let us know if you have any difficulty with hearing or sound or any of it, but we'll go ahead and listen for a few minutes to what they have to share.
I'm Jean Lawrence. This is Laura Lukes. We're the co-editors of the Butte County Gardening Guide and 3-year Garden Journal. Along with, I have to add, Joe Connell, the orchardist from University of California Agriculture and Natural Resources, UCANR, who retired a few years ago, but was our advisor for many years for the Master Gardener program, and continues to be our editor for everything that we send out. So he's our fail-safe, and we are so grateful to Joe. So that's the main editors, and I guess we thought we would talk a little bit about how the garden guide came to be. So Laura was going to talk a little bit first.
For many years, Master Gardeners put out an annual calendar, which we sold around our region, full of tips and good information about planting and plant choice and pests and IPM and integrated pest management. And then we realized at the end of the year, people were throwing all that valuable information away. So we wanted to find a way to get the resources into people's hands that was something they could keep and use over and over again. So we had an initial meeting at Jean's house with a great group of Master Gardeners. There was a lot of interest, in Jean coordinated and organized it around seasonal themes. We decided we wanted to do a garden guide and journal that people could take notes in, which Jean will show you how well used hers is. Take notes, what worked, what didn't work, what rainfalls were, etc., etc. And we organized into teams of seasons. And Jean, as any good organizer would do, let them loose. Follow their, to work on it. Now, we did have the resources that were already in the calendars to then translate into the book form. Yeah, so that was the basic history of how this resource came about.
Yeah, right. And by that point, and we're talking This is 2015 when we were thinking about putting the first garden guide together. Also, Master Gardeners have been publishing an article a week or every other week in the local newspaper, the Chico Enterprise Record, and also in the Orville Mercury Register, I think, and on our blog, on our website, called The Real Dirt. The column is The Real Dirt, and a different article every time. And so by 2015, we had been doing that since 2011. We had a lot of material that Master Gardeners had been researching and writing about that was really valuable. And it's all about where we live, our local environment, our climate, what grows here, which made it, we thought, pretty special for our county. So when we were thinking about the garden guide and dividing into seasons, everybody, went and looked back at the archives, chose topics they thought would really work for those seasons. If there was a topic that we hadn't written on yet, somebody took that on and wrote about it. But then, and so for every, I can actually show this, for every week in the year, there's a little sidebar article, and this is about oak root fungus, for instance, here. And then there's 3 years worth of space for you to write, and keep track of your stuff. So, and everybody will do that in a different way. But the members of the committees, articles, and then also for every, hard for me to do backwards, for every month, like this is June, came up with a list of things to do: planting, maintenance, pest control, and disease in the garden. So all kinds of things to highlight for that particular time of year. And then for each season, those are for the months, then there is a larger seasonal kind of preparation list that each group worked on for their particular season. So it was actually really fun for I think people to go through those and put this together. And that was the initial kind of goal, was to have it very seasonal, have a journal aspect so people could keep track of what was going on in their garden. And then we added, of course, some really useful information at the beginning: sustainable gardening practices, IPM, integrated pest management, how to attract pollinators. You can see I've got all kinds of notes because then we added when we made the second edition. So these things are now in the second edition. All-star plants that grow really well here, basics for soil, compost, fertilizer, controlling weeds, and then, of course, Harry back, and Joyce will be going through all of this with you. And insects that are both beneficial and not beneficial, and a lot of great information on fruit tree care and maintenance. And then planting guides. Those planting guides have been super helpful for the Chico Valley area and for the foothills. When to plant, when to expect to harvest, all of these kinds of things. So
the vegetable planting guide is year round, so it's not just what you're going to put in the ground in the summer. It's if you want
all year.
Winter garden. And Jean already mentioned this, but I think it's important to stress that this is all regional information. So many of the publications you see, even in local papers, is from back east.
Yeah.
And so this is really wonderful because it focuses on our soil types, our Mediterranean climate, etc. So it's
the particular struggles we have with heat in the summer.
Yes, and more recently drought. So it's very handy that way. Another resource that I use a lot is the native plants. And Master Gardeners as a whole over the last few years have been encouraging people to eradicate lawns, replace with natives for many reasons. One is for water conservation. The other is to attract and feed native pollinators. And so you'll have a very lively garden with some of this stuff with the natives.
Is that the section you find most helpful?
That's one of the sections I find most helpful.
And we have a native plant of the month also.
Oh, that's right.
Every month has its own native plant. So this is, for instance, California fuchsia, highlighted in the September section. And then also in the front, there's a section on native planting, planting to attract pollinators. Yeah. So yeah, super helpful. Awesome. Yeah.
Okay, so I apologize for the amateur video taking there. I was doing my best, and you'll notice it sounds like the ocean in the background. That's my tulip tree in the wind yesterday. And so we're doing our best here, trying to follow COVID guidelines and whatnot. So what I'd like you to do is to just take a few minutes now and give you a chance, maybe about 5 minutes or so, to pick either 1 or 2 questions to research in your garden guide and see if you can locate some of the information. So a couple questions would be, what are some things I should be doing right now in the fall? So you're going to want to go to that seasonal section and look through there's approximately 12 to 13 weeks in the fall and see what are some of the kinds of things that you should be doing at this time of year. It's actually an amazing time of year to be in the garden, one of the better times. The second would be, what are our Butte County All-Stars? This is a really important part for our regional component. At our demonstration garden, there's a huge All-Star garden, which demonstrates some of the plants that do exceptionally well in the environment here with the heat, temperature, soil type. And so you're going to want to take a look at that and try to put more All-Stars in your garden because they do well naturally. Where can you find out information about garden pests? See if you can locate some info on that. And then also, what are some water-wise gardening considerations? You could go to the native area, but there's also a section on water-wise gardening. We've added in the new guide. So if you're operating or using your first edition, you may not have the information on Firewise Landscape, but I'm going to give you a link that you can access and you can download the info that has been added. And there's some live links as well to different websites. And then the last question is, what exactly is a microclimate? Because even within Butte County, you will see that there are many different zones, even within your own property. If you're on the north side versus your south or west or east, different kinds of things will do well given that microclimate. And those would be the conditions of temperature and light that you have based on what you've got growing already in your local region. So take about 5 minutes or so and get into your garden guide and research. If you want to share some of your findings in the chat, that would be awesome. Sharon can perhaps summarize a couple of those findings with us. And if you have difficulty finding something, definitely show that in the chat as well, and we'll see if we can help you. All right, so go ahead and take about 5 minutes or so. We won't set the timer, but I'll keep paying attention.
I was noticing how many different stages people are at. Oops. Oh gosh, that's terrible. Okay. I was noticing how many different stages people are at for how they are doing record keeping in their garden. And some people are rebuilding in paradise. Some people don't have plans. Some people still use their boxes and their baskets, like you said. And some people are relying on their memory, which they say is fading. I think this one's fun. She jots down things, and when she goes back in the house, she transfers messy notes into a neater format in a binder, and also keep a chalkboard in my garden. Now that I hadn't thought about, a chalkboard. And that would be a way to do it more on a sort of a timely basis, right? You keep that around, and then you have to erase it and start again, but that keeps you reminding you what you need to go do in your garden as you go back out, perhaps. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. That's a great idea. I hadn't thought of that. I forgot. I also use my phone and take a lot of photos seasonally so I can keep track, and then I have that in my iPhoto album I can compare with prior pictures. For me are 1,000 words. So that's another way of keeping track. So we'll take a few more minutes to do a little scavenger hunt. Thanks, Sharon, for sharing those. Some great ideas are coming in the chat. The all-star list being broken into categories, great idea. And it looks like keeping the phone in the garden. I actually had an insect class, and I agree. It's when you have that in your back pocket, I was amazed at just all of a sudden there'd be a bug or an insect, not sure if it was beneficial or a pest. So taking a photo, either sending to the Master Gardener hotline for ID, but you'll also find in the back of the guide, there are lists of beneficial and pests that we have identified, and there's photos. It's a little harder to tell with the black and white, but I'm going to give you a link that has actually the color photos, and you could download that, print it, and add it to your guide. I find it much more helpful with the color because some things it's a little hard to tell. Is it orange or red? Could it be a good bug or could it be a bad bug? And so it is helpful to see the color. So we've actually added that and made it available for you. Okay, good. The all-star list. Great. Yeah, I'm going to have to go back and review. It's that time of year. It's a great time of year in the fall to start putting in small plants, especially 4-inch, do well if they're put in now. I did a yard replant and finished painting the front of my house and put in the spring plant sale items, and it's been a tough summer. Unfortunately, they're hanging in there, but it would have been better to put them in now. That way they have all winter and fall and then spring to actually get established and not have to deal with the heat and the dry conditions. So it's a good time to be looking at the all-star list. So let's continue on. Hopefully you had a chance to find some of these things, and if not, we'll have more time. You'll have more time once we're finished with this session. So a couple things. Here is the link, and it will be in the PowerPoint, but if you go to this link, ucnr.edu/p/67452, it will take you to a place on our website that has garden guide and journal extras. This is an awesome page, thanks to Laura Kling, who put it together for us. And she's got great tips on how to use a journal, but she's also got a whole lot of color versions of some of the pages that are helpful. As I said, the insect pages are in color there. Also, if you want to convert this to a binder situation, there's some nice color pages of the seasons, which are, color is always nice. And then there are also a whole list of clickable links to websites that have more information, a lot more information. Some to the UCNR website, and others fire landscape resistant kind of information you can find goes to Sonoma or CAL FIRE. And so it's a great resource. I'm not going to show you because I'm not quite sure of my technical skills on that front, but if you just paste that document, paste that little segment in, you will go straight to it. So a couple things that are on there, the tips I thought were really helpful. First of all, just some suggestions on using the Garden Guide Journal. If you notice here, you'll see we have our coil, we have two versions now in the second edition. We have a spiral bound and we have an unbound. So using the guide, not only as a resource for note-taking, for planting, fertilizing, pruning, and so forth, but also the fact that it's over a 3-year period. So you can record the date, it's a blank, so you can record and keep track of the date, the year, the time, sometimes the temperature, whatever information that you want to track, you can record it there. And then you can use, as you look back from if you're that consistent, then you can look back and see what kinds of things did I do last year. What I love and what I was really hoping for in the new second edition is grid paper, because I found I had a whole pad of grid paper, graph paper, to lay out. I like to do things with footage, so I would measure my boxes or measure my garden area and then try to be a little better in terms of planting things that fit in a particular part of the yard. And so using that paper at the back, and actually I have, I'll show you something really quick. I decided to, this is what the original, the first edition I started using, and I labeled not only the parts, well, I may have to show you when we go back to the full screen because I'm not sure you can see. But anyway, there are a lot of possibilities in terms of how to use the grid paper. So we're going to go back to Jean and Laura for just a few minutes, and they are going to share some more details as far as how to use the journal part and some things to consider. And then we will continue. So I'm going to go back to and pick up where we left off.
Yeah, it's just a really wonderful resource. One of the struggles we had when we were planning it is, of course, we wanted to print it in color. Yeah. And that's cost prohibitive. So although the table in the back for the pest identification is in black and white, there are links that you will find that you can go to then, if you've narrowed it down to what you think the pest might be, then you can go look at it online and color photos.
That's great. Great idea.
Yeah.
So what was the purpose then for the second guide? How did it change or evolve from the first original guide?
I think
I think one of the
one
fire.
was the fire.
Yeah.
We had worked up a section on Firewise landscaping. We were publishing about that in the local paper, and it seemed like a really important thing to incorporate into the guide. Also, we had by that time a whole series that was wonderful on garden design.
Yes.
That a master gardener who's a landscape architect had written, and it seemed like that is something that a lot of people would benefit from by having in the garden guide. So we wanted to add those things, and we switched some things out from the monthly articles and put some new material in, because by the time we redid it, we had 4 more years worth of articles. So, and we wanted it to have some new material for people that had the old garden guide. You know, it wouldn't be the same. It's a little different.
And then the other thing is publishing it in a second format besides the spiral bound format. I think this was your idea, to have a loose leaf publication that then you could fit into your own binder and add to as needed, which is, this is a wonderful resource, but one of the drawbacks is you see Jean's stuff flying out.
Yes.
That's just because I haven't taped it in yet. Forcing paper-wise, I just have to tape it. But yeah, you could use envelopes and put your seed packets in, for instance. All kinds of things.
You can tabulate if you want
in a binder.
to tabulate it for easy, because a lot of times we'll fold down corners, and this way you can tabulate.
Yeah, it's actually wasn't my idea. It was a participant in the workshop last year who brought her. She took the spiral, 3-hole punched it, and put it in a binder, and it was such a great idea. Wow. We decided to go for it, and I do have a sample that I'm going to be showing.
Good.
So we'll go a little bit more. I've been using the binder version just to test it out. Yeah. So any final comments or thoughts?
Well, I thought I'd talk a little bit about how I use mine, just, in case it's useful for anybody. So, as Laura sort of intimated just now, I'm kind of a disorganized and not very tidy person, which is true. And I just end up with stacks of things everywhere. So, having my garden guide, I felt like I'm corralling this information. I can glue things in here. I can put photographs of my garden at different times of year. There's graph paper in the new version so that you can draft out, different things for your garden, and how you would organize or where you want to plant things or where things are planted, which was kind of a new thing that would be cool to have in the new version. But anyway, so I keep track of every time I buy a new plant. I highlight it, and that's what a lot of these things are highlighted in here. Where I've planted it, stuff falling out again, but that's the same thing. It's just the one thing. I just haven't glued it in yet.
The binder.
Are your is it color coded? Does the green mean
it's not color coded. Okay. It's just, here I bought an aspidistra, or, I put in some more lamium. I bought 4 eunomus, and this, I'm really actually very happy reading back over this, because all of these things here are still alive in my garden, and sadly a lot of what I have is things that don't last very long, and it took me give it a shot.
And plant what works for you.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, try something else that will work. And that's why natives are really a good idea. They evolved here. So, yeah. And I think it's creative, not disorganized.
Oh,
That's the
thank
word
you.
were
I
looking
love
for.
that. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I keep track of things like that. Often, you know, the material that came with the plant, I put in there. When I buy bulbs, like I'm trying to get lots of things that will naturalize in my yard. I will often put the photograph in and the information about it, and then when it bloomed. So here I've written alongside bloomed at this time of year, whatever. Things like that I find pretty helpful. A lot of times I keep track of the temperature, so I can look back, you know, think like, what happened, you know, and then I realized, oh, okay, I was looking back at, you know, this one has August of this year, and it's like wildfires, ash falling from the sky, you know, so keeping track of that, you know, if I was really good about it, I could do the temperature every day or every week. I try. I don't always manage to keep that up, but you know, I give it a try. But you know, just keeping track of the temperature, the environmental conditions, the climate in particular weeks or days is very helpful looking back. So when I find other ways I use it, like I deal with a lot of ant invasions in my house, usually in the kitchen. So I keep track of when that is, you know, get a sense of what the temperature was, what that is, why that's driving the ants inside. When I find tips that are useful in garden magazines or news articles, like things that are falling out here, I guess, I glue those in or paste them in. I write when fruit in my yard is ready to pick, because harvest changes every year. It's kind of interesting. I have fruiting quince, which not a lot of people have. It kind of, sometimes it's ready in September, sometimes ready in November. It's not even ready yet this year.
And that's the beauty of the 3-year side by side.
You can really compare.
Yeah.
I love that.
Which means, of course, you'll need more than one garden guide to go more than 3 years.
Well, that's what I thought too. So I write down when I fertilize my citrus, when I fertilize roses, so then I know when to do it next. Keep track of things like that. Yeah, that's mostly it. You know, I feel like my garden guide helps me be a more organized gardener than I might otherwise be. So here we have. So.
Well, I just want to thank both of you for not only the wonderful guide that you produced, but just it inspired me the first time I saw it. I thought, oh my gosh, I've saved those calendars every year, you know, and so I've got a box full of old calendars because of the information. And this was such a great resource. I ran out and got one for my parents, my daughters, everybody I knew, because I've just found it invaluable. And that's why I am doing this workshop.
Very happy, Joyce.
Yes, yes. So
Okay, so hopefully we're back. Let's ask you to start your video. Okay, so hopefully you can hear. I'm hoping that it got back. So I'm hoping that you found that beneficial to hear from Jean and Laura. They have much more experience with the journal than I do, but I'm a great fan and a cheerleader. And it was great to hear and see even more of how they go about using the journal and what parts have been beneficial. So these are just some sample pages that you'll get in the PowerPoint. So if you're looking for like what kinds of things are actually written on all over those pages, you can see a little bit more about that aspect. I thought it would be helpful to have some samples. So at first I thought I definitely don't write that much. So I thought we'd just take kind of a quick stop here and see if you have questions. We're going to talk about the new edition and the different versions that we have. And I've been exploring the binder. And so we're going to go into how and what kinds of things I've done to modify it using the binder version. But if you have questions, this would be a good time. And maybe Sharon, you could share what those might be.
Well, I've already seen from people saying that your examples are great and helpful, and that the guide already is providing a lot of information to people. I don't see any questions specifically about what you've seen so far.
Okay. All right, well, let's move on. And so here is the binder version. First of all, I should say that it comes unbound in a package, 3-hole punched. I bought this binder myself, but we have been exploring selling them both packaged with the 3-hole punch, and then also we purchased some binders and put them in. So at Magnolia, they're selling them in binders that we had bought. But you can see from the photo, this is what I did is I immediately labeled my seasons to make it easy for me to find. I got some dividers. And so I have divided it by that, but then I've added additional binder dividers for the other topics that I've been exploring and adding to. So this is just kind of a top over picture. I thought this is way easier to show you pictures than to try and do this on the screen live. So you can see one of the seasonal photos, and in the spiral bound, it is a black and white photo. However, if you go to that link, Laura has actually shared the colored versions, which I just find a lot more inspiring. So I use those dividers, and then you can see that, let's see, no, I guess you can't quite see yet, but you will. So one of the sections I added, because we got a whole lot of resources at our Native Bee Workshop a year ago about different homes, all the different types of bees and the different types of homes that they each need. And so I made immediately a section of my binder for the native bees. And I found that very useful because people keep asking me, so what kind of homes are appropriate for native bees? So I can pull it right out. Another section is that I have my plans. As you can see, I love graph paper. And also I combined it with the planting schedule. So I put a copy, which also is available in color on that link. I put in that because I wanted to have that easily available next to my garden plan. And then all those Post-its that you see are my, my experiment with companion plants and my different neighborhoods, that the kinds of plants and herbs and flowers that do well together. So I just made little Post-its and added those to my garden plan. This is all to scale, so I've measured and then laid it out as accurately as I could on graph paper. Also keep track of the seed packets. I am a terrible fan of saving my old seed packets. What does especially well, I like to hang on to, so then I know what seeds to buy again. Some just either never germinate or don't do well, never come to full fruition. And so those are the things I had them all. I just paperclip them at the end of the season so I can remember. But because in that little plan, and there's not always room to write down the exact type of seed that you plant. So I saved the seed packets. And with the dividers that I got, they actually have pockets. So now I am using the little pockets to save the seed packets that did especially well. That way I can remember next season which ones to plant again, which those zinnias did really well. The appendix has some excellent resources. And then in addition to that, we have these pest notes that you can either pick up at UC Cooperative Extension Office or at our farmers market booth, which has been postponed or suspended since March. Hopefully will be soon, but we have a huge rack of all kinds of pest notes and information that is extremely valuable. Two-sided little sleeves, and I keep the ones that are relevant for me: ground squirrels, the beneficial predators, insects like ants and so forth, pests. I keep those in my pocket that's close to my appendix section, which is also where you'll find the beneficial and garden pest section. So just a couple samples. This is the right direction so you can actually read, but just these are some of my sample plans that I keep in my garden journal. I keep them in a plastic sleeve. I took them out so that you could see them. So each summer, and then also photos. I've been taking photos with my phone, and then I can just print the whole page. So I lay it all out. I can take a photo, or excuse me, print it, and then put it in the sleeve. So I've got kind of a, not only a memory, but also it reminds me of, oh yeah, I forgot I planted those and how well they're doing. And look at all those beneficial pollinators that are attracted to those particular flowers. The zinnias, white zinnias, amazing. I think there were 4 to 5 butterflies at a time on that section of plants. So those are things I want to remember. Another thing I like to keep track is what I actually harvest, which is, I'm a huge vegetable gardener. And so I like to keep track of, you know, what basil type did especially well, or what tomatoes actually produced. This year was a terrible, terrible year. But you can see the harvest on the left is what this time of year I had. I had lots of tomatoes, beautiful basil. I made a ton of pesto. This year, the the one on the right is what I have received so far. Some little scrawny carrots, a few cucumbers, a few beets that I planted last fall, and some peppers and eggplant, no tomatoes. So just keeping track of what does well, and this is the time of year I was actually making tomato sauce, and I won't be doing that this year. But I do have some, eggplant did quite well. Other things that I like to keep track of, and I keep a copy of this, is articles and things that I have on companion planting. That's another one of my big sections in an area I'm interested in. And so I keep all the articles and pieces of information that I see in the newspaper. I cut out insect information, nutrients. There's some great articles and handouts that I photocopied 3-hole punch and put them in my binder in this section. So as I share these resources with others, I can find them easily, which is another benefit to having them organized better. These are the colored versions of the beneficial insects, a lot different than what is in the guide, but as Laura shared in the interview, the color print is cost prohibitive, and so we've made these available for you if you would like to download and print them. They are so much better at indicating exactly what insect is that. This is just a snapshot of the top part. There's actually, I believe, 2 pages, so there's more, and then as well with the garden pests. So this is another colored option that you can download via the link that is shared. So with that, that's all that I have to share for you. Actually, if you have more questions or things that you would like to share or comment on, please feel free. We do have a couple more fall workshops coming up. The dates and times are still being finalized, but you will get that information soon. So if these are things that you are interested in, then stay tuned, and we will be sending information out once that's posted. So Sharon, do we have any final questions or reflections?
Yes, we do have some questions. First of all, people were talking about the photographs being really helpful to photograph what you got in your garden and to put in your guide as either a glued in one, or, you know, however you want to put it in your guide. Yeah. And then they are also helpful to be able to send to the hotline in case they have questions that they can ask the master gardeners about specific pest issues or disease. And then the question that they came up with was, can you talk a little bit about the zones, our garden zones, and how that's relating to this guide?
Are you talking about our zone 14 or?
Yeah. Well, we have sunset zone and we have the other zones.
Yeah. That is a good question. I am not as familiar with that. I know what zone we're in. And I know that actually if you're in Chico, we're kind of on the verge of 2 zones, but I don't know that much information about that. That would be something perhaps to submit to the Master Gardener hotline. I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. All I know is what zone we're in. And it is based on average temperature, climate, elevation, and that's probably changing. It's going to be changing and evolving, you know, over the years because of the situation we're in with climate change.
And then people are asking, where is the new guide available?
Good question. So it is available 2 consistent ways, actually 3 ways. We do sell the garden guide through Magnolia. Magnolia's been kind enough to have it available for you. And so that's one possibility. The other is that we have if you go to our website, we do sell it online and we will mail it to you. And then the third is that if you're out at Patrick Ranch, they have reopened this month for Autumn Fest and on weekends. And so it is available for sale in their gift shop. So that's 3 different ways that you can get it. And hopefully you'll be able to find one of those ways that works for you.
And people ask, what is Magnolia? Magnolia Gardens is on East Avenue off of Floral, I think.
Yes, it's corner of Mariposa
Mariposa.
and East, just before you get to PV High School. So it's a nursery. They have a book seed collection little area, and they sell our garden guide there.
And then the question is, what zones are we in? Well, aren't we in 7, 8, and 9 in terms of the sunset plant zone? And then we have the other zone, which is the USDA zone, I think,
Yes.
right?
Yes, yeah, because we have Butte County has a range of elevations, and yes, so 7, 8, and 9.
And then the, what was the question about the, where did I see that question?
Good question.
Oh, if somebody's up by Oroville, by the lake, I'm assuming they are kind of in the foothill zone, which might be considered the 7.
Yeah, I would, and again, it goes back to the microclimates on where their property or yard is if it's on an east slope, if it's on a north or south, west, and depending on where it's located, it could vary, but I think it's safe to stay within that range of 7 to 9. And also taking a look at what the actual elevation is. Having been to Oroville, it goes from ground level all the way. It could go up to, I'm think about 1,000-foot elevation, but I'm not sure. I actually didn't check it, but I know that there is a climb.
Someone here says they bought a house with a neglected yard that needs resuscitating. What is the best resource for identifying my trees and plants? I'm a very novice at this. So I'm thinking that first of all, they've got probably neglected soil that they'd want to start with. Maybe go back to Cheryl's how to resuscitate your soil workshops from the ground up. And then identifying your trees and plants would be, if you have specific trees that you see, I'm assuming you can photograph them again and send them into our hotline, and we can identify which trees are and what kind of needs they're going to have for you and your plants. That's probably the best way, because you're going to have an issue if you're novice at this, knowing what really should be there and what is not going to be very good there, and we can help you find out why it might not be so good.
I think for identification, it's helpful to get a leaf photo if there is a flower photo, and then stand back and get the whole picture so that you can see better exactly what kind of formation it makes, because especially with trees, there are a lot of different types of oak trees and ash trees and maple trees in Chico. I had to do, last fall I took a plant local ecosystem class and identifying leaves from 25 trees. And so I got a little bit of experience with it, but it took a while for some. There are some apps that are very helpful. Plant Snap, you can take a picture and then you upload the app, obviously on your phone, but it will make a comparison or suggestion as to what it might be. I have not used iNaturalist, but I understand that also is excellent for identification. And then depending on what you learn from that, the other strategy I've found is take a leaf with you, pick a leaf or from a sample of trees or plants you're trying to identify. And I actually go to the nursery and we'll walk through the section until I can find something that's similar. And so that they've got it labeled, and that's one way that I've identified some things that I have. I wasn't really sure what it was. So there's a number of ways you can always send photos and pictures and questions to the Master Gardener hotline, which will be on the very last slide.
And then some people were asking about, speaking of labeling, do you put your plant tags out as well or on the guide? I'm not sure that would be identifying which plants you have where in your garden, perhaps, and putting your seed packet in your
Yeah.
in your guide to let you know that you actually planted it in that location or something. But
Yeah.
plant tags is what they were asking about.
I'm still trying to figure out how to deal with the plastic ones. I keep, especially my fruit trees, I have probably 10 fruit trees, and I want to know specifically what variety so that if I buy another fruit tree, I don't get the same, but I get something different. And so that's one area that I'm still working on. I have to be honest. I find, you know, a tag from an apple tree I planted 4 years ago, and it's still floating around in a basket. So I haven't figured out the plastic things, but I try to record. I planted a whole row of berries, and I planted about 6 different kinds, and I record what type so I can keep track. Some are really heavy fruit producers, and other berry plants I've gotten nothing or maybe 1 berry. And so as I replace the ones that aren't producing, I want to make sure I get the right one. And so writing it on your garden plan or in your journal would be one way. And then the plastic things, I still have to figure out a solution for that one.